back to part 2 of the HaloPSA training series, sponsored once again by Florian from Ristal IT. Fantastic person to know. You should definitely reach out to him in the community. And again, thank you, Florian, for sponsoring me to make these videos and allowing them to be open to the community so that everyone can benefit from them. In this video, we're going to talk about the next set of things. So normally when I do an implementation with a client, we actually have a process or a plan that we try to follow. The most important part of this plan is that we don't start putting tickets, we don't go live on tickets until after our billing framework has been built. We don't have to be live on billing to go live on help desk or live on tickets. But we do want to have the basic framework on billing built ahead of time. And the reason for this is because when you start putting time into Halo, Halo is automatically calculating that time and associating it to an invoice of some kind. And so in the approval screen for labor, if you've got labor approvals on, or in the or in the invoicing section ready for invoicing screen, you'll see time entries and actions be piling up the longer you are ready to be invoiced, unless you already have the logic that says don't invoice it. And then when you're ready to go live on billing, you have to go clean all that up, which can be a bit of a pain. So unlike the university, if you were to follow the university checklist, they have you go live on service desk first before you even touch billing. We cover in our sessions, we cover first going in a very rough order, the organization structure details, the ticket structure, how assignment works, and then we talk about the billing side, contracts, recurring invoices, billing templates, and then we talk about building out your service desk. Also, because we talked, like what we talked about in the last video was how the ticket entities, the backend ticket entities, basically covers everything from opportunities to project tasks, and tickets. Therefore, once we cover service desk, basically the implementation training sessions are finished at that point, and it's completely focused around building. So from a structure standpoint, when you start an implementation with me or in these videos, what you'll find is that there's a lot to talk about up until ticketing. Once we have a session or two on ticketing, maybe 3 sessions on ticketing to cover the basics of all the different types of things that tie into tickets, then it just switches to building out the actual MSP itself and everything from there, including projects and opportunities and sales. It's really just repetition at that point. With that in mind, in this session, we're going to be talking about the organization details within Halo itself. We're going to be talking about top levels, departments, teams and roles, and then item groups, which seems unrelated, but we'll get into that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we are going to jump right into it. We are still using our Rising Tide training.halopsa.com, and we will, yeah, I think we're sharing the right one. Okay, and we're just going to jump right into that, and we'll go from there. So if you remember, these are called areas. We're going to go into our configuration area, and within our configuration navigation pane, we're going to go into organization, which is the very top of the level. There's something called multi-tenancy. We're going to come back to that in a moment, and we're just going to right now configure my organization. So inside configure my organization, you're going to see the name of your company, right? And this should be like, or when I say should, I don't necessarily mean it has to be. The purpose of these fields is so that they're publicly visible to your clients. Just keep that in mind. The purpose of these fields is so that they become publicly visible to your clients, either on the invoice or quote that you're sending or on your self-service portal. You'll have this information readily available to your clients so that they can pay you, so they understand who you are as a legal entity, and so on, how to reach you, contact information and whatnot. So with that, we're going to come here and we're going to start configuring this to be my company, Rising Tide group. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, we should make a sample. I should use like a sample organization information so that they can just be copied. And give me 1 second. I should have prepared better for this. We have an organization that's that I've started building out called MSP Advisors. And it's basically like there's me and a couple other consultants. We get together and we do joint um, joint things, I guess, is the thing. Joint projects. There you go. Together. So MSP Advisors is like a fake brand. It's not real. It's not registered at all. But it's a fake brand that we've created in order to start building this kind of uh, joint documentation, joint systems, and so on and so forth. So I have an organization called MSP Advisors. I'm going to use as my fake MSP. So we're going to come in here and say our organization is MSP Advisors LLC. Let's see what I have in here. I got an address 1234 Tech Lane, perfect. Tech Lane and Suite 300 at Tech City and TS. And let's say it's in the USA, and the postal code is 54321. Obviously fake, right? I'm so glad Halo doesn't do address validation on these fields that they normally have wanted to. In this case, I'm happy that it doesn't. I don't have a phone number. We can say it's something like, 677-555-1234. Email address we could say is support@mspadvisors.com. And then website we can say is mspadvisors.com. And again, we're mostly doing this just so that we can show you where it shows up and how it can be used. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to go to ChatGPT real quick, and I'm going to ask it for fake bank account details. Now, normally it's probably going to like react badly or poorly to this, but let's see if I was able to convince it to give me, yep, there we go. So we've got a bank name, First Virtual Bank, right? So that's the name, and we're going to say bank, First Virtual Bank, and then the account name is going to be MSP Advisors LLC. And we will say account number is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That was easy. And let's say our routing number. Okay, perfect. And then our tax ID number, let's say is 12-1234556. Right. Now we've got our URL, which you can't change this. Generally speaking, if you want to change your portal URL, you have to reach out to support. They have to spin up another virtual website. If you guys are technical and you know how IIS works, there's an additional virtual application that gets created pointing back out to the portal folder with a separate set of settings, essentially, to get used, and then you assign a different host name to it. And so in this case, I'm on hosted, right? So I can't control that. So you have to talk to support if you want to have additional either split host name for the portal or a different or multiple portal host names. You can have multiple portal names for different clients if you want to. Let's say you're doing co-branding. In this case, we're going to follow our branding scheme. So we're going to say that. And if you had a logo, you can put it up here. I don't have a good one. I'm just going to clear that. And we're going to come up here and we're going to upload a new image that we will take from our, give me one moment. We have a DALL-E generated image for MSP Advisors. So I'm just going to go ahead and use that and save. And so that's our logo. This is our portal that I cleared the logo here because I don't have a large banner logo because DALL-E is limited in what it can do. But you can kind of get the point of how this works. And then you have a background image URL that you can use for the portal. I'm just going to show you what this looks like. Right now, this is what it looks like, but you can swap it out. You can take the dimensions of here and swap out for your own image. And then you've got your standard group and your reply address. This should generally almost always be blank. Okay. And again, the point of this is so that the client can access this information easily. Everything that you're putting in here can be accessed through what's called a dollar variable. Dollar variables can be used on templates when you're designing your emails, when you're designing your PDFs for invoicing and coding. And the way you can access most dollar variables, though not all, is by going to the variables address, the variables page inside of your host name. And you can kind of see here all the different variables that exist. and what you can use them for. So notice bank details is under OR, bank details 1, where OR stands for organization. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 talks about the actual fields that exist here. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. One thing I'm going to point out that you may have noticed is that the description here doesn't actually line up with the variable, right? So this, you can kind of already see the reason why people get consultants involved is because kind of already see the reason why consultants get involved in the first place, or why people get consultants involved in the first place, is because the consistency of Halo's documentation is just not great. And this is one of the reasons, again, why Florian was willing to sponsor the videos, is because he was hoping that these videos can help anyone out there to better understand how to set this up, even with the lack of documentation or lack of consistency in the interface. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and save this, and we're just gonna take a look at how this now shows up. I'm gonna jump up here and I'm gonna switch to end user portal. I'm gonna open that in a new tab, and we can see that the portal should load and it should log me in automatically. Now, this may not always happen for you. If you recall, the portal right now, the portal URL is a subfolder, is a subsite of my main instance, my main domain. But if you have your portal on a different domain, the browser cookies won't work and you'll have to log in again. When you log into the portal, it's going to be the same exact credentials as your agent credentials when you log into the main Halo application, or what they call the agent application. So just keep that in mind. We can see up here that we've got our coloring, our logos here. How can we help you today? You can see where the background image comes into play, and you can see all the details that we've put, or most of the details that we've put into the organization details here. I'm not going to run through the portal. I just wanted to show you where it would show up and how an example of where it looks. So we're going to go ahead and close that out and move on. Next thing we're going to talk about is the departments. So in here, we've got our departments. When we have a ticket entity, and this, I mean a backend ticket entity, right? So everything, projects, tasks, opportunities, tickets, and so on. A ticket entity itself, when it exists, has to be tied, it must be tied to two things. There's no exceptions to this rule. The ticket, every ticket has to be tied to A, a user, and B, an agent. And every entity, every ticket entity that exists connects to one of those two, or connects to one of each of those two. And so now the immediate questions come up. Well, what happens when the ticket's unassigned? Or what happens when the ticket doesn't have a contact? We'll put this on hold for a moment. When we're talking about a user, every user that exists, we're going to describe the hierarchy now that works for Halo. Every user that exists appears inside of or I should say lives inside of a site. And every site must live inside of a client or company, and or customer, and every customer must live inside something called a top level. Okay. When we talk about an agent, every agent must exist inside of a team. The team must exist inside of the department, and the department will always exist under an organization. Okay, so every ticket must have a user and an agent, which also means the ticket must have a site and a client and a top level. It also means the ticket has to have a team, which then has a department, which then has an organization. Okay, when we create an organization in Halo, we're also going to have a corresponding customer to that organization. So if I go to customers, notice I've got an MSP Advisors LLC, right? I just renamed it earlier. It used to be called Rising Tide Training Instance. Now it's MSP Advisors LLC. So as soon as I renamed it, it renamed the client as well. And if we look at the client itself, notice you'll have a banner. This client is linked to an organization. Every organization that exists also exists as a client. End of story. Every agent that exists also exists as a user. And so we've got all of our agents here, including myself, that is also a user. And if I come in here and say this user is also an agent, the same exact banner exists. Okay. Keeping that in mind, let's go back and address the question that I blew right past. What about for unassigned tickets, and what about for tickets with no contact? In Halo, there is something called a general user. And so you'll see them here and here, right? And actually, if we go back and just look at our users that are over here, and I'm just going to search for general user, you can see how many general users exist, okay? Notice that they're all on different sites, and some of them are in different clients, okay? Here's how it works. Every client has a general user, and every site has a general user. The general user is a fake contact for when a real contact cannot be found. One of the things that I like to do personally is to go rename general user as no contact, because it's more intuitive to the technician for them to know, oh, no contact, cool. As opposed to them going general user, they have to then understand what general user is. So I'm not going to show you how to do that yet, just something to drop in there. We'll come back to when we start configuring the users and where you can do that. From the agent perspective, the exact same thing exists, sort of. There is an agent called unassigned. You can have an agent that exists in multiple teams. And so those agents, the one agent, the unassigned agent, exists in every single team. And that is agent ID 0, I think. And so if we were to go back to our configuration and we go to teams and agents, and we go to agents and we open up, so notice we've got agent ID 3 here. This is agent ID 4. So like, where's 1, 2, and 0? Let's find out. Let's go to agent ID 0 and see what happens. Nope, we don't have access to this, or it's not found. Okay, let's go to 1. And let's see if that exists. Boom. Agent ID 1 is unassigned. Okay, and it's just like any other agent, no, though you probably can't edit it. The point is that every ticket is assigned. Okay, that's just a license warning. Yeah, so maybe you can edit it. But the point is every ticket is assigned an agent, and while unassigned doesn't show up normally, right? So if I come up here, notice it's not showing, right? I wonder what 2 is, or was 2 deleted? Let's find out. Nope, agent not found, you don't have access. Okay, so 0 doesn't exist, 1 exists as unassigned, 2 does not exist, and 3 is the first agent you're going to get. And that's the agent ID of the original built-in admin. For when you spin up a Halo demo, that is the very first admin you're going to get is agent ID 3. Okay, so every ticket has to exist tied to a agent and tied to a user. And that's how it works. Let's go and talk about top level for a moment. We talked about how everything has to exist inside of a top level. If we go to our configuration and we go to users, we will have under general settings a checkbox that says show an additional level, top level for grouping clients. If you remember, if we're looking at our clients, let me just open that in a new tab here. We'll go to customers. We've got clients up here, sites and users, right? So this is kind of like the hierarchy that we had just talked about. The users roll up to sites, which roll up to clients, and that's basically how they exist. But I also mentioned that every client must exist inside of a top level. Top level is something that exists in every single Halo instance. However, it may not necessarily be visible. This checkbox controls whether or not that is visible. So I can come in here and show an additional level. And notice it doesn't say like add an additional level, it just says show an additional level. And now if I refresh this page, we're going to see that I now have a top level on the very top. We've got users again that roll up to sites, which roll up to clients, which finally roll up to top level. As you can see, it's in top level areas. And we come in here, we got the areas top level, and here we've got clients inside of it. Okay, so the way this works, the purpose of the top level is another form, and I'm going to say the word another, although this is the very first one we've ran into so far. We're going to constantly see ways that we can segment and segregate and build and section off and combine different groups of things together, including by client type. Top level is not necessarily designed for client type. It's designed for an arbitrary way for you to group your clients so that you can do something with them. Even to the level of, let's say, granting permissions to a user. If I were to go into Ronald Smith and look at his permissions, theoretically speaking, we can grant access based off top level tickets, assets, and invoices. So we can say there's a region that every single client in this region, or there's a parent company, let's say, sorry, not a region, there's a parent company that has a bunch of child companies underneath it, and we want to grant everyone in the parent company access, or specific people in the parent company access to all the child companies, this is a way that we can do it. Not necessarily the recommended way, not necessarily the way I would recommend it, depending on how big that organization is. If it's a smaller organization or only 3 or 4 sites, you may want to do it using linked users, which I have discussed in a previous video. Outside of the training series, I did a video about linked users. You can go look at it. But in general, if you can't use linked users, or you don't want to because it's a lot of overhead for linking a bunch of users, you can come in here and grant by top level. So that's one of the reasons why you may want to use it. Another reason is just being able to section off the regions. If you are a multi-region MSP, nationwide MSP with different regions, you may want to have your clients grouped by region so that you can then apply different sets of rules, reporting, filtering, and so on based off region. Now, it's completely arbitrary. There's no like, oh, we've created this new top level and now a bunch of rules are going to apply automatically. There are certain things that you can apply on a top level basis. So if we go looking at our top level areas and looking at our settings here, there are certain things that we can do from a top level perspective, but there are certain things that you can't do right now. So although it's coming, we cannot apply a global charge rate override. We cannot apply a global charge rate restriction. Those two are both coming at some point. And then there are some additional things that we can't necessarily do, although there are things that we can do. Like we can get an aggregate of licenses underneath all clients. We can see an aggregate of sales orders. We can see an aggregate of invoices and so on, right? So these are more like aggregates of things that are going on underneath it. I can't add CRM notes on here, but it's collecting all CRM notes from all clients and placing them on the top level. And here's a collection of all tickets within that top level as well. So how does this actually work? For example, let's say in the MSP advisors, we've got 2 types of organizations. We talked about how MSP advisors is a conglomerate of consulting. It seems like a big word and a very fancy word for just a couple of consultants who are pretty small and work together. But let's say it's a conglomerate of consultants and we want to section off our clients. So for one, we'll come in here and we'll say rising tide. That's one section of our clients. And for the other, we're going to come and make a new top level called Pivotal Crew, which is another company that I work with. Cassie, she's fantastic. And of course, Eileen and Kathy as well. We work together pretty often on a bunch of stuff. So now we have 2 types of top levels, and we can create clients directly under the individual top level. So we can come in here, we can say a client name that we're going to use for Pivotal Crew is, I don't know, let's say Mendy Online, right? So that's my house. And we'll just create that client, and that now exists inside of Pivotal Crew. Now, if we're looking at the clients overall, we can see that we've got Mendy Online and Pivotal Crew, and we've got all the others, the demo clients, the ones that come out of the box are under Rising Tide. And now we can look at the top level and we can see Pivotal Crew has a client. And if we look at Rising Tide, we can see Rising Tide clients and so on. And to even this out, I'm just going to say this one is Pivotal Crew, and we're going to give them cakes and bakes as well. And we'll say that's Pivotal Crew and so on. And now we can see that if we look at clients, we've got a few that are Pivotal Crew and we've got a few that are Rising Tide, right? So this is the purpose of top level. It's to build that arbitrary separation out that'll allow you to design filters and processes and flows around this section. Most MSPs, the smaller MSPs, will not necessarily need top level. Although if you have that situation where you've got multiple companies and you want to keep them together, or you want to build them you want to invoice them separately. So you may need to make multiple clients and stick them under one top level, just so that you can do a general report to show overall profitability from all clients, and then you have the individual clients within that get invoiced and treated as separate customers completely. All right, so that's basically top level. We're going to leave that alone. One last thing actually I'm going to show you is that if I go ahead and turn off top level at this point and I refresh this page, notice the top level screen, it should disappear, right? The top level section disappears, but I still got Freston, Cakes and Bakes. I still have Mendy Online, right? So the clients don't disappear just because you turned off the top level viewing. It just shows you, it just takes away which top level they're in. You can't see that. We're going to go ahead and turn that back on so that we can use that in the future. Moving forward, let's go and start creating our departments within our organization. So we're going to come in here and we're going to take our sample MSP that we've got, and we're going to create some departments here. So we've got project sales and support out of the box. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rename sales to sales and marketing. So we're going to say sales and marketing, and we'll save that and move back. And then we're going to take our operations. Let's add operations here. And let's go to our support. We're going to rename support to service desk. And we're going to rename, let's see, let me save this. And it should show us our new names. There we go. Sales, marketing, service desk. Who am I missing? Network and infrastructure, security and compliance, finance and administration. Some of these are probably overkill, right? I don't need all these departments. I'm actually going to stop with where I'm at. I've got operations, which can cover finance and administration. I've got security and compliance, which can fall under service desk. You know, I've got network and infrastructure, which can fall under service desk. Sales and marketing exists, and we've got projects, which is not technically service desk, right? Projects and consulting or so on and so forth. So we're going to leave these alone and we're going to keep going. The next part that I'm going to show you is the organizational chart. Now, I always have a preface about the organizational chart. I always tell everyone not to use it. And the reason is because this will cause, well, I'm just going to show it to you first and then we'll talk about it. Here's the org chart. All right. So the organization chart breaks down the organization that we're in, MSP advisors, the different departments that exist, and the respective teams under that department, and then those agents within each team. And now remember, we said that you can have an agent in more than one team, which means they'll roll up to the department based off the team and roll up into that organization. And you can have an agent as a team lead in one team, but not a team lead in another. Okay. So when we talk about this org chart, if you've caught on to how I've been describing the Halo hierarchy, there is a certain parent-child inheritance that comes across with it. And when we start dealing with an org chart, we are flattening that inheritance out to just what's on the paper. There's one more aspect that comes into play within Halo is that we'll really tie it all together. And we call those the agent roles. ROLES. Sometimes it's hard to know when I'm saying rules or roles. In this case, I'm using the word roles. And the agent roles can be used to automatically assign teams to agents based off the role, and they're cumulative. So we can literally build a RBAC, role-based access control policy into Halo to properly set up the system to where your overhead, your management level of Halo itself from an admin point becomes very minimal, at least from the agent and permissions side. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to go into that now. But if we're looking at the org chart and we start making changes to the org chart, we are skipping roles entirely. And so now what that's doing is it's breaking the parent-child inheritance at that point. So we don't want to do that. There are a couple other rules that we're going to follow as well, which we're going to get into in a moment. When we talk about having access to a team, we mentioned how every ticket exists inside of a team because every ticket has to have an agent assigned to it. In order for an agent to see a ticket, they have to be a member, at the very least an access member, of the team that ticket is in. Otherwise, they can have all the rights in the world and they still can't see the ticket because the ticket is only in that team and they're not part of that team. In order for someone to assign or see that team, they have to be part of that team as well. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and take a look at how you even add someone to a team. We're not going to talk about the roles just yet. First, I'm going to show you the overall assignment of an agent to a team. If we look inside teams here, we can see that we've got a couple teams out of the box that Halo has given as part of the demo. The ones that I'm going to be using are first line support, second line support, and then triage team, which doesn't really exist. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a triage team right now. Triage team is part of the support, right? So we're going to say it's part of service desk, and we're not going to bother filling any of this stuff out. They're not used for projects. They're only used for tickets, and they're definitely not used for opportunities. and their working hours are default working hours. The team is active, and we're going to say that they're 60. I guess that's fine. We're not going to bother doing any of the other stuff, and we're just going to go ahead and save that. Remember, sequence and tree view means where should they show up, in what order, right? And so there's 60. That's going to show up in relation to everyone else. 10 is first line support, 20 is second line, 30 is third line, and so on. I'm actually going to bump triage to 5. We're going to have them show up before first line support, so that in the structure of how the tickets flow, the teams will show up in order of where they're going to flow through first, right? Every ticket will hit triage first, and then from there, we'll go to either first line or second line or third line and so on. All right. Let's talk about actually assigning access to a team. So I'm going to skip triage for right now. We're going to go to first line support, and we're going to take a look at our agents. We've got a few agents already in here, right? Notice that we've got 2 of them that are assigned by inheritance from a role, right? So this is where the parent-child inheritance comes into play based off the role that's assigned. We're going to skip those. We're going to come back to that in a moment. And we're going to look at the Mendy Green role specifically that has set to access to team tickets. If I were to edit that access, I have 4 options that I can give. Okay, I can be assigned to tickets, which means that I'm a real agent, or a working agent, I guess is the term that we can coin for this. If I'm a working agent in the team, that means I can be assigned to those tickets. Just because I can't be assigned to those tickets doesn't mean I can't do work. Okay, there are other permissions that will come into play under the agent itself that will determine or say whether or not I, as an agent, have access to edit or put updates on tickets that I'm not assigned to. So that's a different permission that's underneath the individual agent. This is a group permission specifically, or a team permission specifically. Do I have rights to be assigned tickets within this team? All right, and that's what that checkbox does. Team leader is pretty explicit. It's not quite a permission setting. It's more functional. There are various things that you can do, like notify team leader or automatic escalations and things like that that can happen to the team leader. So it's a little bit different. There are some permissions that are based off team leader, but those are more agent permissions than group permissions, right? So this is just marking the agent as a team leader of that team. And then finally, we've got the bottom 2 checkboxes, which are pretty self-explanatory. And these are group level permissions that will say whether or not the agent can see tickets that are assigned to other agents, or whether or not the agent can see tickets that are unassigned to them. A use case for this would be a security team, where if, for example, you want to have a team that has, let's say you have a place for sensitive tickets, right? This happens all the time. A client calls in and says, we need to get rid of an employee, but we don't want them, we want it to be sensitive, right? We don't want anyone to know about it. We have to keep it down low until we're ready. And so they may tell you a week, a month, or 2 months before in advance that it's coming. In that situation, you can have one team called sensitive tickets, or sensitive whatever name you want to call it, uncheck these 2, right? And now the only time I will see a ticket within that team is where I can be assigned to that ticket, and I have been assigned to that ticket. If I'm not assigned to a ticket, I will never see any of those tickets. So we'll have like a specially trained person who is known for their discretion, and they're going to be the person who can see unassigned tickets on that team, and they're going to be the one giving those tickets out. And then everyone else is only going to have the can be assigned to. And in that situation, when they get that ticket, they'll have access to it. But until they get that ticket, they will have no idea which tickets exist inside that team. And so this is a way that you can build like a sensitive queue or something like that for these kinds of tickets that will allow you to maintain, again, you don't have to maintain separate queues for what's going on with different sets of permissions based off agent. You can have one queue and it's completely dynamic based off who's assigned to that agent, which is a pretty cool idea. When we talk about, we said how every person has to be inside of the team in order to see tickets within that team. So generally speaking, what we're going to want to give is we're going to want to uncheck the can be assigned to and save. And notice the membership level is now no assign, right? And so that means that I am no longer a working agent of that team. I am an agent of that team, but I'm not a working agent of that team. This does not cause anything too drastic or bad within the platform, right? It's expected for this to happen. So when you're looking at team members within a team, you're not going to see every single person who's been given access to read those tickets. You're only going to see the ones that have been assigned access or have been granted assigned access, right? So for example, if I go into a different tab and I look at service desk, my tickets by team, first line support, I see Mendy, James, Amir. But if I go flip myself to be cannot be assigned to and go refresh this page, I should no longer see myself in the list. Okay, so the platform is designed to work in a way where if I'm looking at team members, it's generally looking at the members who can be assigned to and not necessarily just members who can read. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and put that back in, and we are going to talk about one last thing before we wrap this video up for tonight. We are going to talk about the roles finally. Okay, so if we look within a role, we've got our first line, second line, third line, administrator, co-managed, infrastructure, project consultant, project sales executive, and sales rep. Great. This appears pretty standard so far. Let's dig into what an actual role looks like. Inside the role, we've got a few tabs. We've got the preferences tab. This is used for notifications. We're going to come back to cover this later. Just keep this in mind as you're going through that you can use roles to assign notifications to at some point. All right, we're going to come back and cover that in more detail later. Departments and teams, this is interesting. Here we've got two sections. We've got departments, teams. We've got other stuff too that we can just ignore for right now. But we have the ability to assign a department or a team. And if we edit that, notice that on the team level, we get access to the same options that we had before. Okay. So what this does is this means I can take a role, assign it to a team, and then assign an agent to that role, and it will be inherited, like we saw before, into that team based off the role assignment, using the same settings as we just talked about. We also have the ability to assign a department directly. This is another rule that I give to everyone. Do not assign departments directly to a role. There is very few situations where it's required. And it's not a rule that you have to follow, right? Getting off of Halo for a second, because I always have to have a tangent at some point. When we talk about critical thinking, we talk about designing your own systems, we talk about making sure that you understand how things work. The very first thing you have to do is challenge everything that you're being told, including stuff that I tell you, including that sentence, right? And so there is probably another way to do this that's just as good, if not better, than the way I'm giving you right now. Just off the bat, in a way that hasn't been tested, we can probably adjust the setup to give with using department roles to make it a little bit more simpler in some aspects. Because on the permission level, we can see basic member or view all, right? So the thing is, within these settings, if you grant access to the department level, you also grant access to every team within that department, because you're going now from top down instead of bottom up. Okay, if that makes sense. If I have two teams in my department, I've got first line support and I've got second line support, and I have a member where I'm granted first line support access, but I don't want to see second line support, so I'm excluded from that second line support. But if both teams exist under one department and I'm granted access to that department, I can now see all those tickets. And so the entire structure of the parent-child inheritance falls away when you start assigning department access. Now, yes, you can probably break your departments out and restructure them in a way that you can do less team assignments and more department assignments to balance that out. It may be easier, it may be more complex. I don't do it that way. I find it easier to just stick to the team, to the agent team department hierarchy, and just exclude almost never putting anyone inside of a department. The only time you would ever do it is if there's a specific extreme situation where you would have a supervisor or the owner or someone like that on that kind of level that would absolutely need access to every single ticket, and it would never cause an issue. If you have any kind of compliance or security or least-based access is kind of the thing that you're supposed to be following, especially as an MSP where things like that make a difference, then you should not be granting department access. It should always be done granularly by team. Okay, so I'm going to come in here. I'm just going to delete all the departments from this team. And we're going to come in here. We're going to say first line support is granted access to team tickets as first line support. That makes sense. Let's go ahead and save that. And let's go take a look at our permissions tab. When we're looking at our permissions tab, we can see that this page goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. It's a bit overwhelming. Here's a trick to kind of make it easier. This entire page is broken down into sections. Okay, and so the very first section, the general permissions, will impact the overall access to Halo. Is the member an administrator? Are they allowed to edit their own preferences? And can they edit their own notifications? Yes or no? That's general. If we collapse general, we are now talking about the feature access, and these control access to specific areas as well as specific tabs within areas. Okay. Can they see tickets? Yes or no? Very simple. They can read and modify, or they don't have access at all. Right? Can they read and modify clients? Or can they read only clients? Or can they not have access at all or only view the names? Right? Can they see users? Can they see the CRM notes? The CRM notes is a tab within sites, customers, and users where account managers and whatnot will record ongoing notes for that client, user, or site. And so you can restrict that access completely. Can they view assets? And so I'm not going to go through each of these options. You can kind of see how it's built out. But now that once we get to the end of the feature access, if I collapse this thing, we now start going more granularly. So let's say I've granted access to tickets. I'm going to expand features again, and I'm going to say, yes, they can read and modify tickets. Now we'll collapse them. Okay, what can they do inside of the tickets area? Can they add new tickets? Can they edit closed ones? Can they see unassigned tickets at all? Can they view tickets that are assigned to other agents, right? Can they change a ticket's type? Can they reassign tickets to other people? And can they edit advanced ticket details and so on, right? And so this entire section will go, again, I'm not going through each of the options, but they'll get granular into the ticket permissions themselves. From there, we can see the calendars and appointment permissions, right? We've granted access to calendar and appointments. So we're going to close that. And now we can see the specific permissions relevant to calendars and permissions to specific ticket types, where we can say no and then grant specific ticket type access to view, create, or edit based off those types. All right. We can see the client restrictions. Okay, do we want them to see all clients? No. Okay, which clients do we want them to be able to see? And then we can say they can only access these specific clients. Right? Is there a client group override? So this is where co-managed IT comes in. If you assign a client group override, all you're doing is you're going to select a client organization inside of this dropdown. So if I choose like Mendy Online, and then every agent who is assigned Mendy Online as a client group override can only see agents within other agents that are also assigned to Mendy Online, right? So they can't see any agents that are in either a different group or no group at all. And so this is meant for co-managed IT, where you don't want them to be able to see the agents necessarily, and so they can only see each other. Asset type restrictions, we can again restrict based off asset type. We can say we want to grant access to assets, but only workstations and servers, right? As an example. And so each of these sections are meant to continuously get more granular as you go. Once you can see, cool, you can see all the asset types, but what fields within those asset types are you allowed to see? What custom fields are you allowed to see from the client perspective? And then user custom fields, and then appointment type restrictions, charge rate restrictions, approval process permissions, right? And so on and so forth. The configuration section is the only thing that's a little bit different. Configuration is the ability to grant access to admin level stuff. Okay, so creating new scheduled tickets, that's kind of like an admin level thing. It exists under per client or it can exist globally, but it is on the admin level, admin area. So we can say, sure, they can create scheduled tickets. We don't want them to be able to create ticket types. Global templates, sure. They can create canned text. Create dashboards, no. SQL data sources, no. Custom fields, no. Right, and so you can kind of see you can grant access to certain areas in the admin level based off of role here as well. Okay. And then that basically wraps up the permissions tab over here. Access control is a way for us to see, it's read-only, it's a way for us to see what permissions are effective based off that role. Okay. Let's go ahead and cancel this. And let's talk about the roles for a moment, right? There's a obvious glaring problem that exists for larger MSPs, most especially, but it's also can get in the way for smaller MSPs. If you start thinking about how this kind of works and what I just showed you. Number one is you can have more than one team within the help desk. Now, each one of those teams may not have different permissions. In fact, probably don't have different permissions. If you've got first line support, you've got second line support, you've got NOC analysts or SOC analysts or whatever it is that you're building out, likely the permission level within Halo is exactly the same across all those teams. Okay. What happens if you build out your roles that we just saw? We go in and we assign the departments, teams, and we assign the permissions, and then we grant the right people, and then we go second line, we do the same thing, we use third line, do the same thing, right? Halo even provides a handy clone feature. We can just build out our first role and clone over and over and over again. The problem is that first time you're going to come back and say, hey, guess what, guys? Management made a decision, and we want to change permissions for everyone. One permission change for everyone across the board is going to mean that you're going to run around to 50 different roles, potentially, or more. Maybe it's just 2 roles, maybe it's just 3 roles, but either way, you have to run around to different places and do the same thing over and over again. Okay. If you've listened to any of my videos, you know that I am a huge fan of automation. Automation requires thinking about the do not repeat yourself mindset, the dry mindset, right? So do not repeat yourself is how we should always be looking at things. And in order to do that, we use abstraction to build out separate levels so that you don't have to run into a situation where you end up repeating yourself. How does this work in practice with what we're just talking about? Well, I mentioned very briefly in the beginning of this section that the roles are cumulative, right? They collect together and they flatten down into a list. So we can have a help desk permissions role, which assigns all the permissions a help desk is needed. And we can have other roles to assign individual teams, team first level, team second level. And we can combine both of those roles together under a single agent to then grant the permissions for help desk and also assign the relevant team. What this means is that in the event you get into a situation where you need to change the help desk permissions, you only have to go to one place and do it once. And you no longer have to maintain clones and copies and synced settings across different roles. Okay, this is not obvious by design, but it is something that is fully supportable and very, very easy to do. In fact, the thing that I always recommend on our implementations is to build a base permissions role. So we're going to come in here, we're going to say base, or we're going to actually call it permissions - base. Now, we use prefixes because going back to the automation mindset, you want to be able to easily identify every role related to this function. So permissions is the function of this role. And we're going to come in here, we're going to make sure we're not assigning any teams, we're not doing anything, we're just going to assign permissions. And we're going to say, no, can't edit, read and modify, right? Read only, read and modify users, we'll say read only, read and modify, read only knowledge base, right? Or let's say we're not using knowledge base, let's just say no access, right? And so on and so forth. And we're going to create our list of the minimum permissions that every single agent in Halo is going to need to have across the board. You may end up, depending on your setup, you may end up with more than one base role, but you should not have more than 3. Okay? Because once you have more than 3, there's no point. You're basically defeating the purpose of it. And so go try to figure out a different way to abstract. But you should have, let's say we just have a standard setup. We would have a single role that covers every single permission that every single agent will ever need to have at the least privilege level. Most of the time when we're talking about this, that is the help desk, right? So, and we consider it like this, right? Is there ever a situation where a salesperson or account manager picks up the phone from a customer for an existing ticket or for a new ticket, and the agent has to go, sorry, I can't help you. I don't have rights to do that. Let me pass you off to the help desk. If the answer is yes, then great. I'm wrong, and let's focus your role around what access they would need. If the answer is no, and generally for most MSPs, when you're dealing with a smaller organization size, the answer is always going to be no. You never want that to happen. The agent may have the determination, like the salesperson may decide, I'm too busy and I can't do it right now, I'm going to pass it off. But you don't want them to get stuck in a situation where they can't do it if they wanted to, right? So in that situation, at the very least, every single agent will need to be able to see every ticket and update every ticket, which is essentially the level of permissions a help desk person is going to need. So we usually say that your base permissions is going to be your help desk permissions, and we build that out as base role. After that, we say, well, there's a couple other permissions that someone may need. Team lead may have more advanced permissions. They may be able to reassign tickets, or they may be able to do certain other things that a standard help desk person can't do. So we're going to build another role. Let's go ahead and save this. We're going to build another role that's going to be called permissions team lead. And in that role, we're going to say we can grant the access to read and modify clients, right? And this is just an example. I'm not giving you the way to do it for each team or for each permission type. That's going to be up to you to decide. If you have an implementation with me, you'll be given a template of recommended permissions and settings. But for the most part, this is something that you're going to have to figure out for within your own organization. The purpose of doing that is, so now I've got two permissions, base and team. Now, again, the reason for that prefix is so I can come back here and I can say, boom, here are all my permission roles, just like that, right? Now, if I were to go into an agent and say, Robert Smith, let's edit him. We're going to strip out the sales executive role, and we're just going to grant him the base and the team lead permissions roles and save. We can now see how the inheritance works. If we go to the permissions tab, we can see that these came from the base role. The client level, which was read only on the base, now has read and modify because of the team lead role. And the rest all come from the base, right? And so you can kind of see how that inheritance starts to flow together. It follows the most access, the most permissive is how the roles will fall into play. And so generally speaking, when we're building our add-on roles for additional functions, such as team leader, account manager, finance, and so on, we do not want to set any setting except for the relevant permissions that we want to grant. Everything else should be left alone so that it inherits properly, okay? In that situation, if I were to go back here and strip out his team lead permissions and go back and look at permissions tab, after we can see that his client level is now read only. All right, and that's basically how it works. Now, continuing on the concept of prefixing and doing one purpose only, I'm just going to go ahead and delete the first line support. I'm actually going to copy this text and then I'm going to delete it. Okay, now I'm going to make a new one, first line support. And the only thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to grant departments the team of first line support can be assigned to. Save. Right? And so I'm going to come back here and I'm going to prefix the name real quick with team. Ooh, I actually removed the one. Let's put that one back in. Right? And now if we start looking at our roles, we've got roles that will have team. Right? So these roles will assign the team membership. And we've got roles that have permission. And these roles will assign the permissions membership. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm just going to go ahead and grab this prefix. And let's delete, let's edit this to say team second line support. And then actually I'm just going to delete it real quick. New, paste, save, edit, departments, and this will be second line. Save, save. Okay, edit. We'll come back to our third line support. We'll edit this. Let's delete this. Yes. New team, I can't type, team, paste, enter. And I'm not going to assign each one now. I'm just going to go through and show you how this works. I'm not deleting permissions for the administrator role. This is the only role you'd never want to actually change in terms of deleting. It is a system-based role, and there are things around it that are tied to that ID probably. And so you don't really want to deal with that. Co-managed, this is a perfect, see, notice how it's prefixed? This is perfect. This is a co-managed role to assign the organization. We're going to leave this alone. All right. You got infrastructure. This will be a team role, let's say, team infrastructure. And we'll delete this and make a new one. And we've got project consultant. We can Control-C, delete this. Yes. New team product consultant. Now, the reason why I'm deleting the old ones is because there are too many settings. I don't want to run around trying to find them all. Let's say this one's a permissions role, sales rep, and we're just going to leave this alone. We're actually going to keep this one. I don't want to run around and delete all the various permissions under each of these roles just because I'm doing a team, right? So the teams are very easy to assign. We're just going to delete the role outright and make a new one for that team assignment at this point. And so now we can kind of see how this breaks down with, let's just rename that and delete it and make a new one. We can kind of see how this will break down in display, right? So now I've got permission roles, I've got team roles, and I've got co-managed roles, okay? And so that's basically how we want to start seeing that structure created so that we can identify, hey, all the team roles, there are no permissions going on here. The only thing that happens on a team role is the assignment to the team. So second line will assign second line, third line will assign third line, and so on and so forth. All right. Permission roles, let's say third line, yeah. Permission roles are only ever going to assign permissions. Okay. There's one caveat to that I'm about to go into. We had talked about in the beginning that in order for an agent to see a ticket, they have to be a member of that team. So, because following along the lines of this specific access is basically a permission that we're going to grant. And it's a permission that everyone is going to need to have. At the very least, they're going to need to have read access to the team. We're going to go into the permissions base role, and we're going to go to the departments and teams, and we're going to add every single team that they're going to need to see those tickets on. And we're going to uncheck can be assigned to, and we're going to save. Okay. Now, every person who has their base permission granted will have access to the bare minimum of tickets, read access essentially, where they non-working access, non-assignment. What did I call it? Non-assigned agent access or something like that. I don't remember what I called it. Where they can see the tickets and they could technically put notes and work on them based off their permission level, but they are not considered a real member of that team, or a working agent of that team is what I had called it. There you go, that's the term. With that being said, let's go back to our teams real quick, and I'm just going to build another team here, and we're going to call this sensitive tickets. Okay, and we'll put that under the service desk department, and we will save it. Now, going back to that use case that I talked about, if you go to base permissions and we go to departments and teams, we're going to grant access to sensitive tickets and uncheck these two. Save. All right, and now we can see that they have access to their own tickets only at this point. All right, wrapping this up, if we go to an agent and we go back to Robert Smith and we say you have base permission role, all right, if we look at departments and teams, you can see that they were given access to first line support, second line support, all of the teams basically as per the role. Now, if we go back and say he's also a first line support guy and a project manager. Project managers do not need to be technical. They just need to be well organized and have an understanding of how projects work. So someone can be both in first line and a project manager, although generally speaking, it's not common. If we go back to departments and teams and look at it, now we can see that they're in first line support as far as being granted access to being able to be assigned tickets, and they're in first line support because they can see those tickets from the permission space role, right? And so it all collapses into one place at some point. I hope this was helpful. Oh, I forgot to go into one more thing. I talked about item groups. Okay, we want to talk about item groups before I end this video. This is getting a little long, but we're just going to start. The actual concept itself, we'll get into more detail when we start talking about accounting package, which is going to happen on the next video. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk about the item groups on this call, was to just get your mind thinking about how you want to structure them. In a lot of PSAs, ConnectWise Manage, for example, you have a mapping that occurs from product type or category into a GL code, which then gets assigned to a GL code from your accounting package. And then the item, when it gets pushed across, will be placed into the GL count of the mapping that occurs. With Halo, it works a little bit different. Halo does have a concept of account code. So if we go to the billing section and we look here, we've got account codes here. And so we can create account codes to be used for the GL codes, basically. When you tie in an accounting integration, this whole thing changes depending on the integration that you're using, or it may not change. But for right now, just keep in mind, like, this is where account codes exist. When we talk about items, which occur inside the item catalog, over here, it's the items area, we have different groups over here. Now, it's important to start thinking about what groups you want to place your products into, because when you are creating your products, some of the things that you have to do is associate under the billing tab a income account and expense account. And this is based off of the account codes that would exist, okay? In order for you to not have to do this one by one for each product, what you can do instead is associate those account codes on a group level. As far as I know, I don't know if they've changed this yet or not, but as far as I know, the only way to edit these groups is through the items catalog. There's nowhere in the configuration side that you can go to see and modify these groups. So you have to go to the items, and then you can right click on these groups and you can create a new one, or you can edit the existing one. All right. When you're editing the group, you have the ability to associate billing settings here, such as income account, expense account, tax, and so forth. So one of the things that we want to start doing, which we're going to talk about in more detail later on in the next video, is to start thinking about how to classify your products into what groups. These are like the categories, if you're coming out of ConnectWise Manage, that you would place the items into so that they get associated the correct income, expense account, tax information, as well as the correct settings here. Is it a recurring item? Is it a non-stock? Or is it a contract, or is it a deliverable? Deliverable means that it's something that you're inventorying, okay? Whereas do not track stock literally just makes it set to an unlimited 9999 quantity in stock. All right, so that's the basic thing for groups. At this point, we're going to get more into it in depth on the next video. I think the next video that we're going to be talking about will be covering the specifics of an accounting integration, and we're going to tie it into an actual integration package. We're going to tie it into Xero using our sample Xero database. So with the sample Xero database, we're going to connect our accounting integration. We're going to show how that works and build out actual clients and whatnot. I'm just double checking that that is the right, yeah, accounting integration and Azure setup. Okay, so I don't know if we're going to cover everything on the next video, but I don't know, we'll see what happens. I hope this is helpful. Thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.